Tried to hit that quickly. Let's see if we succeeded. Yeah, that's pretty fast. That's pretty fast. Hey everybody, welcome to Friday Night Fights. If my mic is on and all that, we'll see. Huh? Is the YouTube not working or something? Loud and clear. Okay, excellent. Oh no, there it is. Friday Night Fights on YouTube. Great. Just takes them a moment to get going.
Yeah, did I tell you I'm going to be out of town next week?
No, I didn't know.
I needed to tell you that, and I will send you an email. Believe me, I don't expect you to remember words dropped in the air. So I'll send a group thing out.
Okay.
All right, folks. So we're set up here. I'm gonna need another couple minutes to settle everything with the kids. But
fun and games, right? Yeah.
we'll be back.
Be
back very soon.
So I'll be tired next week. But,
All right, we got a game going though already. 4 nights. All right, let's see what our gladiators here are up to. Anyone over 1600 looking for a game? Sweet Blues is happy to play a game with you. Hey, Raise the Curve, how are you? Just a little hectic here Friday night tonight. So the aggressive knight gets challenged, makes the trade. Boom, boom, boom. We get rook and pawn against two minor pieces. Classic battle. I'm not sure what the point of the pawn move was, though, next. I would have expected one of these two pieces maybe to come out next here. So let's see, what's the point of this pawn move? Does white maybe want to play f4 at some point, using the extra pawn to kind of get some strength in this area? That would make sense, although it'll take a little while because you also have to move the king out of the way of the diagonal. So it's not easy to achieve. We'll see. So far, PLNR3 with black. I know you can't see the full names, but PLNR3 here with a little bit of a lead on the clock. Now, sometimes a lead on the clock is interpreted as meaning the person who's got more time, and Adi has got more time, right? Or Aditya, perhaps. But in this case, it's too much time on the clock. They started with 45 minutes. So I'm going to give the lead on the clock to the player who has used a few minutes here, right? They've got a lead on using their time and thinking about the position. Hey, Cash, thank you so much for the raid. Shout out back at you. Whoops, did it wrong again. Woo-hoo. All right, folks, there's a link for following our new friend, Cash Carbon. That was a pretty long session you just did, huh? Wow, it's late. I guess that's like Friday night. You play longer than other nights. That's what Friday nights are for. X for chess. Oh, there goes the queen, I think. There goes the queen, I think. Yep, there goes the queen. Oh, hit a new peak. Right on. Felt like you definitely hit a new peak in how fast you were seeing tactics on the board. Oof. So G3, I like this move from PLNR3 going into the light squares with the bishop, trying to push the queen away. Because potentially if the queen runs away, PLNR might have considered dropping the bishop in here and really blocking that f4 plan for a long time, right? So, so that was a very strong move that black thought of, and I guess white didn't properly take black seriously, right? I mean, if your opponent plays bishop g4 and you think they're just hanging the bishop to your queen, you should really double, triple, maybe even quadruple check that one, right? Because, I mean, you gotta have some faith, some fear, some respect, something for your opponent, right? Especially your opponent was thinking about their move, you know? They're playing slower than you. You got to be a little worried that they might have seen something more than you, and there went the queen, and that was the end of that game. So GG is given, and PLNR 3 takes the first lead in our tournament here. Classical Friday night fights. First blood. Quickly off the quick queen drop. So let's recap the first few moves of this other board that we haven't seen yet. So we start with a Sicilian defense, meaning black comes from the side trying to control this square and not let white play d4. White plays d4 anyway, but black trades off that center pawn and then brings the bishop to a nice diagonal that's been cleared off in advance by the pawn trade. Super logical. White tries to block that bishop. Boom! Black fights back in the center. Well timed by Guha. And this is a great opening by black already. Very nicely played. You see black has demolished everything white set up in the center as far as pawn centers. White still has a piece on a good square, but black's got this pawn, which can come in at some point, be the last center pawn on the board, give black a lot of influence. Plus, black's got a pair of bishops lurking, which is a small advantage at higher levels. So this has been a super, super clinical opening from black. Let me just show this again, this key moment here. So black hits the pawn with the knight, but also gaining control over d5 at the same time. White can't push the pawn and kick black's knight because of knight takes e5. So they defend the pawn while developing best they can. The downside of the pawn on c3, though, was white can't play knight c3, defending the pawn and the central square. I know this is like pretty high-level stuff going on this game here, but you know, if black's going to play at that level, we have to talk about the game at the level at which it's played. So knight f6, white has to defend. Black could already try this move d5, but they just very flexibly castle. Perfectly good. And then when white develops the bishop, boom. Striking out there. And normally, you know, with the bishop here, you'd be hanging your pawn on d5 because there's the e pawn and the bishop and a knight on c. Oh, the knight's on d2. So black's got it covered. Pawn takes, knight takes. The knight comes into the center, strikes the bishop. Doesn't really have anywhere good to go. So we get that trade. And nice early game from black. We're going to take another little pause there, leave you with that position to think about. And you can also watch as it develops. We see Guha playing this game great and also now investing a bunch of time on this next move, which seems like a very good idea. We'll be back with you in another 5 minutes or so. Tu te rappelles, il fallait le réchauffer, hein? Maintenant, il faut faire quoi? Okay, so we only missed 2 moves because these players are giving it a couple minutes thought, which is beautiful to see. Get bishop g4, trying to ramp up the pressure here, different than e5, right? But ramping up the pressure, looking to bring the rooks out faster. Very interesting. Of course, black doesn't want to trade this bishop. White plays h3 and black trades over here. Wow. Because if they traded here, white could recapture, look for a queen trade, and the position's very, very equal. So black goes knight takes d4 for an imbalance, and now white has to choose to take on d4 with one of these pieces, or to take on g4 and let the knight keep going. Ay, ay, ay. It's an intense moment for white. If they find the right move, things should be okay, and close. They should be able to sort of keep it equal-ish. I think the answer is to take the bishop. Oh, yes, please do, Sweet Blue. Love it. That's always part of how this thing can work. Anyone playing any classical game in or out of the arena can send me the link to their game. They just have to not listen to the commentary until after the game is over. You know what I mean? Like, it's recorded as a video. You can go back and watch it later, but don't listen to what I think about your game while you're playing, or I might suggest knight d2 to you, and then your opponent might play bishop takes d1 to you, and then what are you going to learn from that, right? What are you going to learn from that? hg4, I thought that was the right move, Everest Knight. The trade, and the queen coming out. Yep, perfect. And then trades. Yeah, this endgame's about equal, which is super cool. Let me see if this Sweet Blues game, whoops, hang on, I did it wrong. Copy. Come over here, throw that in, and there you go. Games to watch. Sweet Blues and Toms, you know, going at it. High level game here. 90 plus 30. Alapin Sicilian. And they've turned off the stream. They understood. They'll be back to watch later. So let's bounce between these games back and forth, shall we? We're going to give an evaluation of this endgame, and then we'll go look at the other openings. So I think, you know, if white had taken on d4, they could have maybe gotten into a little bit of trouble. Like, for example, bishop takes, black takes here, hitting the queen. You take your back, black will trade ya. Then they'll trade ya. And now look at the white pawn structure in this pure rook endgame. Are there chances to draw? Maybe. Are there chances to lose? For sure as well, right? Some nasty pawns in this rook endgame. So that looks miserable for for white. Whereas with h takes g4, white should be more or less correct here. We've got a pawn majority for white over on this side and for black over on this side. A little extra file for white, but this pawn's a little bit bad back here. It's I was just discussing this with Francisco yesterday, that when you have these endgames with opposite majorities, majority being where you've got more pawns, right? So black's got a pawn majority 4-on-3 on the king side, we say, right? And white's got the pawn majority 3-on-2 on the queen side. In this situation here, what you don't want is to have crippled pawns on the side of the board with your majority, because it'll make it really hard for you to create a passed pawn. But having crippled pawns on the side of the board where your opponent has the majority is generally a pretty minor factor. I mean, there are cases where it might matter, but there's lots of cases where it won't matter. So, yeah, so the pawn majority won't really be the pawn structure won't really be a problem or an issue for white. We could look at the relative value of the pieces. This bishop's a little bit bothered by that pawn. This bishop's a little bit annoying black. So the bishop's like maybe a tiny bit in white's favor, but very slightly. Rooks. Excuse me. Black's going to get the first move with the rooks, and black's rooks are connected. So there's a little chance that black could get the d file, but the fact that they can't hang the a7 pawn might mean that they can't really get the d file from white. So we'll see how that plays out. You know, if white just goes rook d1, looking to trade and move the king somewhere. So then the factor that I think is causing a couple people in chat to think white might be slightly better is that a queenside pawn majority is famous for being better in the endgame than a kingside pawn majority. Now, of course, that's only the case in positions where the kings are castled on the king side, right? If the kings were castled on the queen side, then we would say that this pawn majority would be the better pawn majority because it's further from the kings. Okay? Now, so it's basically, it's like it's the distant pawn majority that has the possibility of making the distant passed pawn. Now, in a king and pawn ending, an outside passed pawn super valuable. In a knight and pawn ending, outside passed pawn super valuable. In a rook endgame or a bishop ending, it's less of a factor because all the pieces other than the king are such long-range pieces that it's not super big deal. But I guess we would guess, if we had to, that chat would be right that white is just a tiny bit better off of that queenside pawn majority, so to speak. But I'm going to emphasize it's like a tiny bit. It's like technically you all are correct, and I don't want to take that away from you. But in practice, the position's got to be super close to equal because, you know, before the rooks and bishops are traded off, this black king is going to be re-centralized. And if the kings are on the E file, it doesn't matter kingside or queenside. You know what I mean? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. So it should be very close to equal. White went rook d1. So black could trade, but that just helps the white king maybe. Black could play a6, white will play king e2. I think white's going to look... It depends how strong the engine is, B-Bong Head. Like, I think technically an older engine would give you a tiny advantage for white, like 0.1 or 0.2. But a really modern engine looks so far ahead that it'll give you pretty flat zeros. You know, the latest and greatest will probably give us some zeros in this endgame. Black goes for a6. Good choice. Random tip for anyone who wants to win this kind of endgame and outplay their opponent. With a mutually open file, it's hard to avoid that file. In other words, it's hard to play like this and say, oh yeah, I don't need the D file. I'm just going to start pushing my majority. It's hard to believe that, you know, that you're going to be able to just give up the file and play around it completely with doubled rooks and the impact they can have, right? Right now they can't get to d2 because of the bishop, so then they play a move like bishop d4, and suddenly, you know, white can't really keep the black rooks out of d2, for example. So normally if you want to play for a win in one of these positions, you want to keep some pieces on the board to outplay your opponent. Of course, even the king and pawn ending, you could outplay somebody, but keeping a few more pieces on the board in an equal position gives you more opportunity for outplaying. But you can't really leave 4 rooks on the board. So what you'll see seasoned masters do in such positions when they think that they're better at the endgame than someone and they're hoping to outplay them is you'll see them often trade 1 rook, then not bring the second rook to the d file. Keep the second rook on the board. Maybe use it to back up the pawn majority that they want to push. a6. We'd expect king e2 here. Why not double down the h file? Okay, good question. Let's try that. Let's see if we can ignore the d file, shall we? Put this rook here, and now let's just do something simple. Rook h2, rook h3 maybe is simpler. This is coming pretty fast. I mean, I can try to harass, you know, with weird moves over here. Because h7, you can win a pawn, so it's a big deal in that sense, but you're not going to checkmate the black king, so it's not like an uber big deal in that sense. Does that make sense? So, I I'm not in danger of getting checkmated as black. I have to make threats that are as big as a pawn, because that's what I'm standing to lose to Viral Stigma's plan. Let's play something like rook b5. If b3, I've got bishop c3. We go rook b5. If rook d5, you want to give up on your plan and play rook d1. Okay, you can do that. I mean, then we're back to the game, right? Okay, so it doesn't make too big a difference compared to the game. And we get king e2. And now we're going to poke our eyes in on another game that's going on here, right? Let's check out Tom's and Sweet Blue. Sorry, Tom's and Sweet Blues. So, Sicilian defense. c3 is Sicilian. Fair enough, yeah. You threaten an idea and your opponent may or may not notice it, or they may notice it and panic and not find rook d5 to b5. King e2 is quite innocuous, and it's probably a move you're playing anyway, so it certainly doesn't hurt you in any way. The other defense with rook d5, king e2 was that black could play h5 instead of rook b5. That was also a plausible defensive move, maybe. Or can you just trade rook h1 and win the pawn before black can back it up? Yeah, actually you can. So I accidentally found maybe the only really viable defense there with rook b5. So your move was pretty dangerous, I guess, especially if someone's unsuspecting. All right, so white plays c3. Plan is to play d4, set up a nice pawn center. Black attacks white's pawn center with the knight. White doesn't have the convenient move knight c3 to defend these two central squares, so they push. Black knight doesn't get sent anywhere too bad, goes to d5. White plays d4. Trade. Knight f3. Because black can't go win more pawns here in view of this. Right? So black's just going to develop. White takes back. Black challenges the center. White develops. Knight c6. Trade. Trade. Knight here. So white's threatening the d5 pawn. White did just give up that really good bishop for a knight that was just kind of... I mean, I guess the knight is on a good square. Normally, don't they play knight c3 to try and get it out of there? I don't know. I don't know. To me, bishops are just a tad better than a knight, so I don't just straight up bum rush at the trade like that. Trades here, so the queen can defend the pawn. And push, yeah, that looks nice for black to me. Yeah, black position looks pretty good. Oh, they're going fast. We finally caught up with them. Looks like black might play d3 here. Keep that pass pawn moving. Is one option. Another option would be rook e8, trying to say you're going to just take white's pawn on e5. Feels like white should still be okay, right? They're keeping up on development, and this pawn is about as weak as it is strong, so should be close here. Black uses the queen to go after this pawn, not the rook. That's interesting. I guess it allows black to defend this pawn a little bit more solidly with a rook. Maybe black's afraid if they go after this with the rook that white will line up a rook with black's queen. But, you know, I wasn't even sure that white could offer this pawn. Maybe they can do it because of this. I don't know. This is kind of risky from white, to my eyes. You know, the rook's not active, the bishop's a better piece than the knight on this open board, and that pawn looks like it's staying alive. Queen e7. Queen g3, defending the pawn and threatening bishop h6. Maybe that would have been the answer to rook e8 as well. Rook e8, queen g3, huh? Similar, perhaps. We still have to deal with that. No really happy or convenient way to do it, but it looks like Tom's has found something in the game. So what was the choice? Moving the king over. Yeah, I guess that's just what you have to do. Pay a little tribute of a tempo with the king. Defend the pawn on h6. I would prefer to be black here, but it's, you know, a mild preference. White hasn't done anything terrible where I would feel like they should be in big danger yet. I'd be a little bit just minorly worried as white, but kind of assume there's probably some way to handle the situation. It's going to be a rook move now. So either we're feeling active, we put our rook behind this pawn to do stuff, or we're really thinking about their pawn, we start trying to set up a blockade or pressure on it. Kind of the main two ways to go about it. Let's move our board over a few pixels. Morning, son, y'all. Planning to study any chess this weekend? I ask the most obvious questions sometimes. Yeah, maybe knight c1 here. As Stigma suggests, instead of moving a rook, could be the plan to come here. Knight c1, we'd have to just, you know, oh yeah, we've got it double defended like this. Yeah, knight c1, sure. That makes a lot of sense. Once you're here, then we don't feel this bishop anymore because it's all blockaded up. That seems really good. Oh, you know what? White played that. Holy moly. And it prompted black to get really aggressive. They're trying to win white's e5 pawn while the knight's on c1. You see that? g5, critical move. I think Tom's had anticipated knight to c1 and decided in advance this was the plan. You know, if the bishop backs up, just try and grab a pawn, I think. That makes a lot of sense. Ooh, it could be the one way to punish knight c1. But white plays check, so they've got something else in mind too. I think they're going to keep the bishop this way? Or is there something even more dramatic coming? The queen is kind of in the way of the main plan now, so in that sense, black should feel comfortable. There's no like perfect square for the king, so it comes to a dark square. Bishop h2. All right, first moment of truth. Can we just grab that pawn? There's other possibilities too, like, you know, bringing rooks into the middle of the board. Now that the knight's not coming to d3 immediately or obviously, there's definitely some options. But yeah, Tom's plan was to grab the pawn. Tom grabs it. Little double check of what was planned before. But still, you know, playing relatively quickly actually for the amount of time they have. You'd think that one of these moves around here would be worth a few minutes of time. Since we're talking about potentially winning a full pawn, and a full pawn is worth more in a classical game than in a blitz game. In a blitz game, you know, whatever, it's a pawn. You just keep slapping your pieces around. But in a classical game, sometimes you'll lose because you're down a pawn. All right, well, Sweet Blues is feeling the missing pawn. They're worrying a little bit here about what to do next. Just have a quick look around for other games or boards, perhaps. Here's one. Hola, Damian. Bienvenido. Bienvenido. En el streamo. All right, so all the rooks got traded, probably on the D file, right? If we had to guess. This move G5 nails down a weakness at H7, but there's a famous saying from somebody, or many buddies. Sometimes these famous things, it turns out that like one of the reasons it's famous is that 500 different people said it. It's only a weakness if you can attack it. Can white attack the H7 pawn? Well, if there were rooks on the board, that would be a weakness, right? Like Stigma had the idea of pressuring on this file. Without rooks, not a weakness. Not a weakness. So we can recap the moves we missed real quick here, but I think it's going to be a pretty straightforward D-file story. So white played king e2, black just held still, white made the trade and offered the second trade. E6, of course black could also choose to play h5 immediately, getting basically an outside pass pawn, right? We're calling this, you know, the queenside majority or whatever, but that's an outside pass pawn. Actually, that's one of the issues with this pawn structure. Black does have the possibility of making the first pass pawn here, and it's not a bad one. Without rooks, that's a pretty good pass pawn. That's going to draw the king up, probably. Maybe a missed chance to put a little bit of, you know, pressure and worry on white here if black played a quick h5. And maybe that's why white eventually goes like f4 and g5, is to stop black from making this pass pawn. Because, look, white actually moved the king towards c2 and then c4. So they're not really, for a while, they weren't taking into account this possible move from black. And I think that Guha just didn't notice or realize how valuable it would be to have played h5 at some point here. God, I mean, even at this point, white doesn't have bishop f4 to cover this square, so you play h5. White better check if their king is in the box, right? White's move. They got to start hustling. You know, one more move and black's queening. And honestly, if you start hustling, it costs you the b2 pawn. So this might even just have been a straight winning move here for black. Just a simple, you know, push the pawn and start running.
And just kind of throw away the spoon.
Throw away the what?
The spoon.
The spoon?
Yeah, it's the spoon's fault that it fell out of my bowl because it's too top heavy.
Okay, if you want to.
All over the wall.
Black's just waiting. Guha doesn't really see anything they want to do here. So in the end, white might get their dream, you know, of kind of paralyzing these pawns and slowly advancing these ones. Maybe now white's a little bit better. Also, sometimes it depends who the players think is better, you know, like if white thinks they're better and black believes white that white's better, then they start both playing like white's better, and then it slowly becomes to be true. H5 is still better than doing nothing, but it's not dangerous at all in the same way, Stigma, because there's no passed pawn here for black. You have to play for this E5 plan somehow, right? White should not have played F4 in the first place, Stamen. I don't think so, yeah. They were a little safer with their pawn on F3 and F2 than F4 and F3. Also, you could think of it this way, Stamen, right? This is black's pawn majority. The further up you move your pawns, this is the side you're weaker on. You're giving black opportunities to, attack your pawns or trade them faster and make a passed pawn faster. If white could move this pawn back to G2, it would be very hard for black to make a passed pawn. But because it's up on G4, very easy. So yeah, F4, definitely a mistake. H5, very strong. H5, very strong. At some point here, H5 completely winning. And now, who knows? Maybe white will become slightly better at some point. All right, thanks for the raid, Squirrely. Shout out, Squirrely. Nope, nothing's working. Shout out, Squirrely. And, of course, to all the raiders, welcome to the dojo. This is our Friday tradition, classical chess. When most people are at their most tired, most people are at their absolute most tired, that's when we ask them for the greatest possible effort. All right? And, whoa, what's going on here? Just want to say thank you to Plinner3 for the Bezos bucks. And, yeah, classical chess, players get to think for a bit. Guha has been thinking here for a bit. I guess the saving grace for black is that if white ever plays c5, trying to expand this pawn majority, the black king might be very powerful on d5. So maybe there's some world where the king comes to e4, controls this square, and then white can start pushing the pawns further, and then try and bring the king back through d3 to c4. But it seems whenever you back up, the black king will go to d5. So personally, I don't yet see grave danger for black. I don't yet see a really powerful plan for white. Well, we should consider bishop d4 as well. Oh no, sketchy rest stop. You're making me fear for you. I've been up and down the 5. There's not much on the 5 at night. Assuming that's the way you're going because it's faster than the 101. And you probably just want to get from A to B. Oh, Plinner3, you're the one in the lead in this tournament, right? Yeah, PL. It was more obvious on chess.com that your L was an L. Here I wasn't sure L or I, but yeah, Plinner3. Double locked. Locked and padlocked. Man, oh man. Yeah, Friday Night Fights is awesome. You could join us some other night. Not so sketchy, just a lot of random men. What is sketchier, Blood Queen, than a lot of random men? At a dark rest stop. Okay, Viral thinks that there's never anything really for black to worry about, but I've got a very important question about this position, actually. I've thought of one other plan for white here. The other plan I have in mind for white is to go king d3 and then play bishop d4 and ask black, are you okay in the king and pawn ending? Imagine, if you will, the bishops trading and the black king coming and the white king coming to d4. If the black pawn majority is totally frozen by white's 3 pawns like this, white will eventually win with b4, a4, c5 check, king c6, king c4, b5, takes, push the king back, and then the white king can just walk through the dark squares to f6 and take f7. And you're in the training program, giving us the Bezos bucks and the real dojo training program bucks. Well, I hope we're giving you your value, PLNR. I hope you're enjoying yourself. So, does that worry you at all, Viral Stigma, that plan from White? Honestly, I think most players over 1,800 will probably have this instinct, and Viral Stigma is well over 1,800, hundreds of points over 1,800. I think players over 1,800 have the instinct that when they see the possibility to go into a king and pawn ending, they're like, uh-oh, I better be careful. Because they know that if it's lost, it's dead lost. There's nothing you can do anymore. You will just go h5 as soon as we trade bishops. Oh, no, you're saying before I get to bishop d4. Okay, so Viral Stigma's not afraid because they're saying that if they're waiting around and I threaten bishop d4, the moment I threaten bishop d4, they're like, okay, I don't want to think about bishop d4. They'll play h5. Now, if I trade bishops, I'm losing to the h-pawn, right? So basically, I have to trade and go into this, and now there's nothing to fear. Not even fear itself, right? Just nothing that can go wrong anymore. Black's a little bit, maybe a smidge better. So yeah, I understand Viral Stigma's confidence now. They know not to wait around for the bishop d4. All right, Stamen tells us, I saw Aman give a shortly lesson on bishop endings, and essentially one should avoid placing pawns on the same color as the opponent's bishop unless you can be sure you'll be able to push it further to an opposite colored bishop again. To the opposite color again. There were, of course, plenty of exceptions, yeah. Yeah, exactly, Stamen. So one has to be somewhat careful in such situations about ending up with, let's say, this kind of a pawn, right? A pawn that can get attacked by the opponent, targeted, etc. Oh, hey, YouTube. Y'all just started talking. Hi, Alvin. Hi, Evan. Hi, P. Bishop. Actually, I'd rather call you Alyechin's cat, if you don't mind. Good to see you all. F6, a suggested plan for black as well. Over there. So let's see what that might look like. If black played f6, how would that go? Well, devastating for white would be taking and then losing to black's h-pawn. That would be a self-inflicted wound, we gotta say. But what do you want to do if white doesn't take? You know? I think the move you have to be most careful about before playing f6 dark web is bishop d4, trying to tie your stuff up. But I'm also not sure how great this is for you if white just leaves it. Like, I'm not sure, do you really want to take? Oh, I could see Viral Stigma. Maybe Dark Web's thinking that if white sticks around, there could be some world where by trading that pawn, you get your king to f5. And then you can start making progress on the king side with your pawn majority. But there is generally going to be bishop d4 check. And there's generally going to be bishop d4 when you're kind of a little bit frozen here. So it's a cool idea, but I don't think f6 is going to truly help here. I think the best we have is this h5, pawn takes, bishop takes. It unfreezes the whole pawn majority. And the game is not a dead draw yet, because you can move your king out of the way, look for a moment to play e5, or you could eventually play f6, e5, or there's like plans. You can eventually make a pass pawn with these, so you can sort of keep playing as black. Let's see, we've got a move from Guha, and it was just king back to c6. So long think, and the king has already moved back and forth from d6 to c6 a couple times, so I guess Guha just didn't think there was anything too exciting to do yet. So hanging around. From white's perspective, there's still some stuff to do. You know, bring the king up. Then maybe b4, a4. I feel like these players think that white has the advantage. From the way they're playing, I think they're sharing a narrative that white has the advantage and kind of reacting accordingly. Black's reacting by feeling like there's nothing for them to do, nothing to undertake. White has been very cavalier about bringing the king far away from black's h-pawn, freezing these pawns on dark squares. Something you don't do if you think your pawns are going to get targeted and attacked, right? This is what you do when you think you're a genius and you found an exception to Amon's rule about the pawns on the same colors as the bishop, and you think you're a genius. You're going to freeze their pawn structure so it can't make a passer, and then you're going to win on the queen side. So I think it's fair to say that white is probably kind of thinking they're a genius, and black is thinking like, oh no, I'm up against a genius. Just buying into that narrative, as happens a lot. Okay, hi to Icy. Yeah, David Justice, f6 could maybe be followed by e5. Sure. But it didn't seem, from my calculations, like there was going to be a way for it to really work out or do anything problematic. You've lost games to thinking you're a genius. Yeah. One of the important things about thinking you're a genius is you need the opponent to buy into it, right? If they buy into it, then they start defending all your threats. They don't look for blunders in your plans, right? They start thinking very defensively. And then you're golden. Like, if you can make your opponent believe that you're a genius, everything gets real easy. It's one of the reasons higher rated players win against lower rated players. It's because the lower rated players sometimes see their rating and assume that they're a genius. And then they just start playing defensively. Other reason higher rated players sometimes win against lower rated players is because they're better at chess. That's another factor. Okay, I'm going to click between games again. Sweet Blues and Toms. Squid Raider thought they were a genius as well, made what they thought was a winning double exclam move earlier tonight, OTB, and it was just hanging a piece. Yep. Okay, so what's happened here? Black took the pawn, white attacked the knight, and the knight just went calmly back to c6 and kept that extra pawn well guarded. Yeah, that's pretty safe for black. Secure extra pawn, developing the rook. Looking to trade more. No, okay, not sure what to do next. All right, so white's holding the blockade for now. It's technically difficult to try to win this position with queens on the board for black because the king's a little bit loose. If black could have traded queens, which they correctly, they thought that a queen trade would be good for them. White said, I agree, backed away. If they could trade queens, it would be easier. The king could come approach this pass pawn, help support it, or help support playing the move rook e8 to counter the file. But as it is, black can't challenge the file. The rook is worse, and they've got to keep the king covered. So it's not easy to figure out how Toms can make any more progress right here. Definitely viral stigma. White should consider h4 at any moment because you can chip away at the king's pawn cover. More chances at a perpetual, right, in this position. Or whether it's a perpetual or a checkmate or just some tactical resources or threats. Having your opponent's king open is like an endless font of tactical resources for you, right? So h4 is just good in that sense. The one thing to be careful about, though, is like h4 and you take, you've got the e file, and then black plays rook h8. And you say, oops, I just gave them a file. You know what I mean? I mean, this is like a much more of a high-level thing, but these are high-level players here, right, in this match. But basically, there's like how many rooks are there and how many files are there, right? If the files are scarce commodities, then the person who controls the files has a bigger advantage. Once you've got files everywhere, then having your rook on open file is no big deal. Your opponent just puts theirs on an open file too. Dabo's thinking that black could just open up like this. Just completely open the king's kimono, right? And it's just say, rar, get your queen out of this amazing square in the center. Right? Back her up big time. And sometimes you can advance the pawns and they just can't get around behind them. But this, I mean, it's a very risky looking move. I guess the queen doesn't have a lot of squares. She goes to f3 or e2. Let's maybe guess f3 for now. What's next? I feel like you need a follow-up. It looked almost crushing. Sure. I'm not sure if it's crushing or not. I feel like you need to have a further move in mind. Very good point, by the way, from Viral Stigma, that you'll play h4, so you have the option to chip away. But you might not take right away. You might leave that hanging over black and start playing moves like queen g4, queen h5, stuff to set it up. Not just h4 blind trade and then look for your follow-up, right? It's a good point. And then Icy also suggests to us a possible plan for black of rook d8, backing up the pawn, rook d7, and then rook e7, challenging the e-file with the help of the knight. So that's going to be a major plan. And Tom's did start with rook d8. So a6 to keep this knight safe from b5, which in turn keeps this pawn protected and the possibility of rook e7. Now this structure here is a little bit vulnerable to knight c5. Right? So black already has to start calculating stuff like this. Right? Maybe white can even take the queen. Yeah. So knight c5, you know, black's already got to be careful about that, right? Every little push, every little everything does something. And honestly, even here on d3, maybe there'd be rook d1, and you might have pushed the pawn just a step too far. Right? Depends if there's a way to back it up or not. Oh, knight c5 just got played by Sweet Blues. So they hit the spot. Take a look at that. Yeah. Careful, careful, black. This b4 was clever. Still a lot of work to be done. I was going to start thinking about the idea of like b6, knight a6, and then the knight's maybe not good there. And then I remembered, you know, knight b7. White doesn't have to take a pawn on b7 for this to be a problem. So knight c5 played. And yeah, now black's got to do a righteous classical think here. Queen c7 defending. Okay. So on the defensive for sure. Now, I mean, h4, because these pieces are further away from the king. Very possible. I mean, I thought of rook d1, d3, keeping pressure on the pawn, but it makes it easier for the opponent to maybe take the e-file from you. We're already on such a good file. Why would we go passive? I mean, I think h4 feels like the move that pokes at black the best here. You can also play the shocking queen e6, but if black ignores you, it won't do much. Okay, Icy says you go queen f5, and then if b6, allowing this whole knight a6 thing, which we don't yet know for sure what happens, rook here. This may be similar to my line in that if black takes, it's bad, but if black ignores, it's not clear what white's plan is. Oh, it's here and here. Just going after the knight. Oh, Icy is a genius. Rook e6. Have to be very careful, right? Because it's a wild position. D3. If knight takes, then black can take your rook. So there's not knight e6 check anymore. Check here, and of course there's all kinds of moves white could try, but if they take the knight, boom, oh, check and collect the pawn. Nice. I had thought for a second, you know, queen takes, whoop, and here white would lose up a queen. Check here. And if you take here, there's a Matovich. Okay, yeah, maybe white could go for this. Queen f5 could be tried. And maybe rook e6 becomes a major threat there. Knight e7, there's generally going to be queen h8 check, and that's not going to be good for black. So, oh, we've got a move in the game. Rook to c1. Okay, so this move here, this is the simpler move. It's consistent with b4 and knight c5. It's looking at moves like knight b7 and knight a6 anyway. Going after this piece. Yeah. Nice little pressuring move. Maybe rook d6 covers things for the moment. I hate just getting into mode where I'm just like defending, trying to hold on to my stuff. You got to also keep looking at ways to counterattack. That's why you see me every move I'm calculating d3 for black. You know, saying forget about a6, forget about b7. You know. Oh yeah, tough questions for black here. Now our other game's going to go a little bit faster, so let's peek back in on our end game. Ooh, the white king is taking control of a square. So we got b3, king here, f6, king e4. So remember, I thought bishop d4 was a major problem for black here. Like, I think f6 is a mistake because bishop d4 kind of maybe wins or something, you know? But white just kept bringing the king. Black trades. They could still play f5 check and just push that king back. Black trades. God, they could also still play h5. Looks better, but they trade. And now the white king's kind of established. Now at some point, viral stigma, this bishop d4 move, which you correctly would have avoided even thinking about, but now here we are, and the players are going to have to start thinking about this at some point. It could be a real problem. Now white maybe has something, right? King further up than black's king, plus the idea of bishop d4, plus this pawn is technically in a king and pawn ending. This is one pawn holding two. So essentially, if I just sit around as black and trade here, the odds are super high that this king and pawn ending is lost. Yeah, very high chance it's straight up lost. Maybe 100% chance, you know, if you round the long string of nines up. 99 point, lots of nines. You've already studied all the openings. B5. All right. Fighting against white's pawn majority here. Yikes. Potentially black can ignore that and play bishop d4 and be in a winning king and pawn ending. Potentially also black could trade on b5 and then play bishop d4 with the winning king and pawn ending. Potentially white's just winning. c5 is maybe the least winning option for white of all options here, because after black plays b4, this pawn is a liability. It's cut off and attacked. Not really sure what white should do about that. Yes. Yes. How did you know? You can't count, but that looks winning. Okay. Yeah, I mean, some of us can count. Others have good instincts about different positions in endgames, so that's fair. It's good you have your instincts to work on. I'll point out one little detail about these positions. Let's say we go bishop d4 and black backs off like this. This is like a last-ditch defense sometimes in same color bishop endings, that if your opponent advances like this, you check. And then they get forced back and you can back off. So if they want to move the king through here, then they sort of have to move the bishop off that diagonal, and then you can always come back and keep their king out again. So sometimes when you only have one square, thank you very much. When you have only one square to get through in a bishop ending, sometimes you just can't get through it. You know, which is like a weird, funny thing. But the other thing I was going to say about this ending is it's not even guaranteed that the king and pawn ending, or any of these endings, are winning once this pawn is isolated from the other ones. Because white has to be very careful to keep it defended now. Let's say I trade, and then play this potentially genius, potentially idiot move of king b5. I'm gripping this pawn and I'm preventing king c4 for white. You know? Now if you go c6, now I'm up a pawn. You can keep my king on the back foot. You might be able to draw down a pawn, which is already an accomplishment in the king and pawn ending. Pretty rare. You can rush in here, yeah. And you can keep going if you want. And now maybe with f4, you'll really be looking like a genius. Oh, but here's the thing. It's hard to ever win this even by getting h7 conquered. Right? Like, let's say I just hang around. I think you're drawing despite being down a pawn, which is already really, really great. But here's a technique that makes it very hard for you to ever win as white if the pawn you need to capture to get into my position, or to crack my position, is an h pawn or an a pawn. I can follow you in as you get deep, deep, deep in there, and it feels like you're about to just be like, I got it, I'm in, I take everything, but then I freeze you against the side, and wait, maybe here you've got this move. Yeah, you just win with this move. Okay. So this is not a case where the freeze works. This is a case where you won down a pawn. That is incredible. That's why you hate endgames? You hate openings and you hate endgames. Tell me you like middle games. I think f4 might be the cool winning move here for white. Nifty. Nifty stuff. Wow, amazing to lose the pawn and still go ahead and win the game. That's the value of this g-pawn freeze in the pure king and pawn ending. Holding these two pawns back and really far back. And this is part of why black should have played h5 ages ago. Oh, you hate middle games more than end games and openings. Okay. Fair enough. They're funny, aren't they? Talking to you. No? Aren't they funny?
I mean, that's just pretty amazing.
My chess people.
I mean, you seem to think so.
They say, I just hate chess, period, but my rating says I'm good, so I kind of want to keep playing.
Well,
Really?
Yep.
Huh. Awesome or terrible, depending.
Yeah, you should get him to join Friday Night Fights.
Yeah. What makes you want to keep playing about being good at it? Because, like, you could be good at being patient through surgery, but you wouldn't sign up for a bunch of elective surgeries. So, if you don't like it, just because you're good, what about being good at it gives you an incentive to play?
Which is fold laundry and clean the kitchen.
Right. Instead of playing chess, you could fold laundry and clean the kitchen. All right. The exciting endgame continues. White chose to retreat the king. That can't be the very best here, can it? Huh? No. In an ending like this, the most important factor on the board almost is how far up the board your king is. So retreating can't have been optimal. There's a good chance that bishop d4 was close to winning for white here. Although, as I've pointed out earlier, there's still like a last ditch of defense here with the bishop because of the check, right? You can play this move, so there's no bishop check, and then your opponent plays here, and your king can't yet get in, right? You go bishop here, and they step back. Now your own bishop blocks you, right? You come here, they come here. And sometimes you just can't get through the last stretch. But definitely with the king on e4, white's better, and black's on the defensive. But white brought the king backwards. Now black brought the king forward for the opponent. Again, here I probably wouldn't make that trade. Not really sure what I can do anymore now that I missed my chances to play h5, but we could think about it. Well, are you old enough to stop doing what your parents want you to do? My kids were born not doing what their parents want them to do. You enjoy winning. Okay. Do you know, Concord, no matter how good you get, you still win about the same amount because you just end up playing with people at your level. Like, if you look up, the win rate of... Actually, the draw rate goes up, so your win rate goes down as you get better. If you look at, like, Magnus Carlsen's win rate, he probably wins something like 20% of his games. No, maybe 25%, draws 70%, loses 5%. You might win a higher percent of your games than Magnus right now. So I don't know how much better you want to get. Chakaruski. All right, here comes the pawn majority. I think you got all the wrong reasons, B. Concord. You might need my video. 350 points. But now you're just trolling. You didn't lose 350 points. But just in case, here's a little video for you. For a tortured soul of chess. There you go. I made that for all the people who don't enjoy playing chess and still play it. It's the most important chess video I ever made, I think. See, Dabo, maybe it's comments like that that made me at first think that you were from Canada. Americans have this fascination with dopamine. It makes it sound like you're not an American. A little bit. Just a little bit. Maybe a bad conclusion because Canadians are also Americans or something. What?
Can you see what Lupin did to the shirt?
What did he do?
I think he uses a napkin.
Oh, yeah, he does that with all.
Washed it with soap, but it's like just like brown and disgusting. Like
Yeah.
So I have to wash that one.
He also might have just rolled in dirt with it on. I think that one came home brown one day. I think I remember seeing that shirt come home just completely brown.
And dry it. It was so good. I'm losing my mind here with the laundry.
How are you doing, Steve Nash's workout? Nice, viral stigma. That makes sense. You just did what you enjoyed, and then you remembered it better and got better. Okay, 350 in Blitz. That's more possible. I've heard of that happening to people. Wow. That cupcake is small but potent. Woo! One bite will keep you up for at least an hour. Back into gear, back into training. Cool. All right, so do we have any advice for black here who's going to get slowly pushed back? Pawn majority is frozen by this pawn, and the white king dreams of one day coming through e5 and eating everything. Personally, I think that like the fun and satisfaction of chess is almost unrelated to how good you are. Although it is related to like the feeling of improving, but you know, a 200 rated player who's improving might be just as fulfilled as a 500 rated player who's improving. As long as this bishop's here, it's going to be hard to push this pawn, but it's true that maybe at least if this bishop ever moved, we could then try to be ready to do that. Oh, did your game finish, Sweet Blues? Let me see the end of that game. Sweet Blues and Toms draw. All right, let's back up a few moves. In the end, they played faster than the lower rated players there because here we got King F8 in a simplification. Huh. So there's nothing powerful for Toms to do here? I'm not a masochist, Dabo, but I enjoy working out. Good day, Lauren. Amazing post-game conversation. They play a classical game and in the chat say, well played, nice game. We could rematch if you want. let's just play a match. Let's play a world championship match. 14 games, classical chess. Pretend you're in Singapore. Work out harder then? I can't. Now you're trying to put your masochist stuff on me. I'm allowed to work out less hard if I want. Honestly, the advice I normally get is to work out less hard, not harder. All right, so let's see. So there was nothing to be done here, huh, about this? here. Okay, I'll just try the move that I'd thought of. It looked bad, but I'll try it. This is what I had thought of for Tom, so let's just give it a look, see if it would have done anything good for black. My idea behind rook d6 is to avoid knight b7 and knight a6 by overprotecting, or sufficiently protecting, let's say, my knight. Overprotection is a little bit kind. So let's call it trying to sufficiently protect. You're going to play a4, brutal, scary. Knight b4, knight e6 check, rook e6. Yeah, I don't think it works. I think black can actually get away with this. Only because on this check, they counterattack your queen. And if you try and desperado, they just go. Oh my god, queen d4. Queen e5, queen b4. b5, and the game goes on. That was insane and unexpected. Or b6, you know, if rook c5 doesn't, queen e1 doesn't win. It could only be good for black because black's kept their extra pawn, yeah. So I'm going rook d6. I'm not pumped about a4 for you, maybe. There is also queen e7. I see, yeah, but then I thought white could trade queens and take on b7. It felt like it was headed towards a lot of pawns trading, right? With rook b6 and so forth. Maybe you could hold on to an extra pawn there still, so maybe it's viable. But knight b4 looked good. Yeah, I mean, more something like f4 or h4 seems like it. So let's take back a4. Let's play h4. It's hard for black to move. Oof. Yeah, maybe this idea of b4, knight c5, rook c1, maybe this was too strong. Maybe black's advantage is like gone. I don't see really how to improve the position, you know. Sorry, h4 against queen b8. White will generally have knight takes a6 with it if pawn takes, rook takes. And if you were counting on something really fancy with the queen, I've got queen e5 check. Is it a classical game, Alvin? You want to give me the link to your game? So anyway, in the game we got king f8. Takes, takes, takes. Yeah, white's queen is way too bully for black to avoid a queen trade, right? Just queen's in the face. Takes, takes. Pushy. Wait, going all the way. Oh, and then rook d3. Content to draw it out. Yeah, good game, man. Ends in a draw. Fair enough. Fair enough. All right, let's go back to these folks who are using all their time fighting this endgame deep into the endgame. White's king wants to go to e5. Nope, not yet. No, e5 giving the white king passage. Whew. That looks like enough for white to win this endgame. Should an 1800 play out that 3v3 rook endgame? I did when I was 1800. I played it out when I was 2400 against Alex Yermolinsky, a grandmaster. He laughed at me, and eventually it was a draw. But, you know, laughing never hurt anybody, right? I don't know. I wasn't able to do much against Yermo in that endgame. But against an 1800, I figure I could win it. Almost certainly. And let me put it this way to you, Sweet Blues. If you had to play out that rook endgame against me tomorrow, and you knew that I wouldn't agree to a draw, that I would keep playing to the end, how confident are you that you could get a draw? If you're really confident that you could get a draw, then you can agree to a draw. You don't need to practice playing it out. If there's some part of you telling you like, oh man, I'm very worried about that scenario, that sounds like something bad might happen, then that might be a reason to practice it. You know, I mean, again, all these things, it's everybody's own choice to make, right? Like, if playing it out is torture to you, then according to Viral Stigma's theory, right, you could agree to a draw and just not worry about it, right? But if you're just asking me from like a perspective of like, is there any chess to be learned or gained or whatever, I think there probably is at an 1800 level, probably. Gotcha, Dabo. Okay. So I enjoy exercising, and I also enjoy trying to get better than I was before. E5. All right. The white king comes in. Whoo! Oh, deeper. Man. The king's dreams are realized. Should he stop for a snack at the rest stop, or should he go all the way? Both players spending a lot of time on this endgame, so they're definitely developing their endgame skills here. They're each, you know, really respecting the complexity of the position. I think, like, the key moment, this is definitely a losing move, right? As long as the pawn is like this, white has not yet proven a win. If I look at this position, do I feel like black's position is creaky? Of course. Are some people in chat thinking like, oh yeah, easy win, blah, blah, blah? Sure, there's some people in chat thinking like that. Would they be able to actually sit down at the board and win it? You know, who knows? But this mistake here, I think many of us are pretty clear that as the king gets in, you know, he's got the game in hand. Planet says take the snack, and Everest just got the eyes on the goal, leaves that pawn on e5, says who cares about the pawn on e5, it's not going anywhere. We're just gonna go in here. Wow. Oh, he's gonna get both of them. That's winning. That's winning. Could he have taken on e5 and still gotten in? Maybe, but I feel like this was very clean. Tempo on the bishop, straight in, take the pawns. Who cares about the e-pawn? Yeah. Hey, ZJ. You seem energetic, as always. Or, you know, whatever the American word for Genki would be. In good... I don't know if there's a single word for it, but, you know, in good spirits. Okay, so B Concord is one of those wondering if it's an easy win, even if black doesn't play e5. So, instead of e5, perhaps king c8. Right, being careful because king c7 allows a bishop trade. So, B Concord's not throwing out bad moves for black on purpose. Bishop f4. Bishop e7. b6. King c6, I'm not sure how that's possible. But basically you want to come in once my king's over here. Okay. So maybe the bishop needs some better checking distance. Oh, but it can't ever get the bishop d6 checking distance. Yeah, yeah. Uh-huh. I hear you. Okay, so bishop e7. We're going to play maybe king e5, king d7, then b6. Here, 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 here. Winning easily. Yes, that's winning. Yeah. Oh, yeah, there's no king. Yeah, here. Thank you, viral. Look at that. Makes it a little less easy. But the king can still go to e4. Takes there. Yeah, that's not enough. White won it. B Concord might be right about still being able to win that position for white even without e5, which is useful and interesting to think about. Yeah, this part, did anything surprising happen? No, just a trade and then queening. So the big question remaining is, yeah, if white's already winning without e5. Which we definitely fear might be the case. But are we certain? What move did he have black play? King c8 waiting. All right, I've got a tougher move to wait with here, B Concord, I think, instead of king c8. I'm going to back up just a little more distance. The point of this is to basically play this kind of a defense. Check. Right? Force you back and then bounce out. That's a tougher defense, yeah? Hey, Everest. We watched much of your game, so you'd be able to go back and watch the commentary, recap, etc. Yeah, you can go king d4. So we'll just try and keep your king out of c5 as well. You can check, but actually king somewhere, king e5 should work. With bishop c7, king e4, bishop d8, bishop e3. You think my king's on b6 at some point? Okay, let me go further back. My king's never been on e5. Bishop c7. Bishop f4 here. Check here. Yeah, my king was never on b6, so if you go bishop e3... So if you go bishop e3 here, I don't have to take on b5, I just go bishop back here anytime you back off from this. It is very similar to the Neiman game with Mishra at the Grand Swiss, yeah. Line with king d4. Oh, okay, okay. So at some point I came across this way, and then when the king came to b6, then you went here. Right, so this king b6 might be a small mistake. Let's see what the point is. Check, you want to come here. Then when I go back, you want to check, very clever, take this and come up. That might not be enough to win though, right? King c4. let's say king e6, king here. You got to keep that pawn defended, right? Here, here. That looks like a draw. We take this one and sack for that one. Yeah, bishop c1 might win, sure. You got to keep this defended, so ultimately you have to go here. I come here threatening this. It might, but I think I think what you can maybe see be conquered from this exploration already here. King d7, nice. Yeah. King d7 here. That forces us to ask the question about this position, right? Coming back to defend his pawn. Oh, go to h6 to freeze the whole thing, maybe? After h6, king f6 wins. Nice one, Icy. That's evil. That's evil. Look at that one, folks. Ugh! That's like a checkmate. That's like a mate in one in endgame terms. King f6. Nice. Yeah. Gorgeous. Also, I bet that's the only winning move in that position. Let me just see if I can grab this and save it as a puzzle for the future. No, unfortunately, the position with bishop e7 is also still winning here. So it won't make a good puzzle. Too bad. What we see, partly, is just how many twists and turns and tactics and tricks there are in this little endgame with just a couple pieces on the board, right? I think Viral was telling me not to even chase with king c2. So bishop c1, I think Viral was giving me another advice for black here. After bishop c1, go after the f4 pawn. Easy draw. Okay, let's see if that's true, shall we? King here, f4, king here. King here. If we put the white king on e7, would the whole puzzle work? Yes, LG, I think it would. Let me think. I think very clearly would work. Yeah, that's a great solution, LG. Are you a composer? Okay, Viral wants to just go bishop here. Yeah, that was pretty simple. So we can try f5 for white, sure. Takes. King here. Bishop here. Draw. Or still bishop f4, sure. If black wants to win, maybe. Someday you wish. Oh, yeah. I mean, if you figured out that puzzle works with the king on e7 in 10 seconds or something, I think you could be a composer for sure. Yeah. I mean, black can't win if white's careful, right? White could go here, give up this pawn, take this pawn, and you should be able to hold this one to a draw as white. I don't see any real risk of losing it at the moment. But, I mean, certainly, yeah, you might as well play bishop f4. That's a good-looking move, right? You shock your opponent who's trying to beat you, put some pressure on them, sure. In a practical game, yeah. Every bit of pressure you can put on your opponent is worth doing. Fascinating bishop ending. You see, one cool thing, right? One cool thing, though, you see, like, how much more defense was possible from the very beginning just by backing up so that we've got this resource, and you can't just walk through. It went from being like oh, it's easy, you know, color my numbers, to an epic piece of analysis. Okay, so ZJ has a question relevant to LG, which is, if a random guy just happened to invent a beautiful chess puzzle or composition, what would you do after that? Is there such a thing as publishing a chess composition? Yeah, there is. I've never done it, so I don't know exactly where you would publish it. I imagine the audience you'd be publishing for would be a very small audience if you had one single puzzle to publish, right? There are competitions for such things, and they give out, you know, maybe 3 cash prizes to the top 3 most beautiful compositions, as judged by a jury, so to speak, a panel of chess aestheticians. If you've got a whole collection, you could eventually publish a collection as a book, or if you teamed up with other people, you could put together a collection between several of you. If you had a single beautiful study, I mean, you wouldn't have a career just off of selling your one position, right? Here isn't bishop c5 winning. I don't know. Be conquered. What's the idea? You want to sort of hem in that black bishop. You want to play f4, holding it there. b6, if they trade, you win the pawn down, king and pawn ending. And if they back up, then you come around. Possible. It's tricky. There's good night, Alyachin's cat. There's going to be like a little bit of a hope of a. So let's just like play some simple moves headed towards your idea for now. There's a tiny hope that they can try and get out of the way of it here. But again, they don't have the checking distance for your king now. But when you come here, they can play a move like this. And now again, you have to get your king through this narrow space, right? It's not 100% guaranteed that you make it through. And this is one of the interesting things I found with some of these endgames, is they look so simple, and then when you actually work through it, sometimes it's like 10 moves of very strange maneuvers of the bishops going around in a circle around this like one penetration square. The same thing can happen when you've got king bishop and one pawn against king and bishop, and the king's far away, and you're trying to queen your pawn and push their bishop away from it. Yeah. There's like this famous study. Let's see if I can find it here under practice. See if it's still here. I put it in the curriculum here once upon a time, but it's been a while. Let's try drills. Endgame fundamentals, maybe? I don't know where it'd be classified now. King and pawn, 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 king and pawn. King and pawn, king and pawn, king and pawn. King and pawn, king and pawn, king and pawn. How do I keep going? Hang on, sorry, I'm going to make this really ugly for a moment. This is not letting me scroll. Hang on. Some bishop, knight. Well, this one here is an example of what I'm talking about. Okay, let's see if I've got the screen okay again. All right, see this one here? This one here, it looks like super simple. Like you just play knight d6, you block the bishop out, then you walk through. But the bishop goes here, and then it goes to b6. Then you've got to run the bishop out of squares on this diagonal. When you do, then it can like bounce around. Like sometimes these positions here are insane work to make them work out. Like I don't know, we could see if I get it right. I would start with let's see. If I start here, then they get in, then I have to hold them in, walk the king around. I'm going to try blocking the bishop out first. Just a first instinct. Oh my god, the computer didn't play proper defense. What? Why didn't the computer play bishop g1? Come on. Okay, now we're fighting. All right. So now if I go knight c4, the bishop comes this way. Sometimes you have to bring your king here first to cover these two squares, then do this. When you do it, they try and switch diagonals while you're doing it. Then you come here, they come back. King e6, bishop c7. King e6. They had the computer playing in these positions a little bit better. Okay, I think I have to go king e6, bishop c7, and then I'm not sure what the next step is. Why didn't they do it? Ay, ay, ay. Stop playing bad moves. I have to play for both sides here? All right, I'll play for both sides. The computer even says on the side here, folks, it says king g2 is a blunder. Like, it plays king g2, and then on the side it tells me king g2 is a blunder. So now there's some kind of trick. I have to go like here. They move. Now I attack the bishop. If it goes this way... Wait, they didn't move their bishop away from me. What are they doing? They have to go here. God, I have to help this computer at every turn. Now I think I go knight here. No, stop doing that, computer. Okay, I'm going to play every move, folks. We'll stop the computer here. So it goes here. Now if I chase the... You see, if I chase the bishop, it comes back this way. Right? And then I need to get back to play knight d6. So here I have to go knight here, I think, to block it. Then chase it here, here. God, if I chase it this way, then it can come back this way. And I can't stop it from here. To go... Oh my god, hang on. Oh, it's because the bot is at weak level. Okay. Okay, I see. See if I can figure out the solution. Do you see, folks? If I go king b7, the bishop can go to d4, only move. And then I can't stop it from going to e5 with any of my knight moves. So I'm not sure that's right. Knight e6. Stopping almost every bishop move. Yeah, knight e6, bishop here, king here, bishop here, king here. That looks good, Icy. Let's see if that's right. Bishop goes there, king moves, and there you go. Okay. So my point is, even little endgames like that, that are like the most basic thing in the world, are sometimes quite tricky with a single pawn, right? And so, similarly, this kind of stuff, you sometimes think it's like the end, and then just getting through that last square is like a 10-move stupid maneuver. Which you could call annoying or stupid or fun or amazing, you know? Depending on your feeling and your taste and all that. Alright, let's see if we got any other games still going to watch and commentate on here. Looks like all the games I was watching are done. Bishop g3 in this line. I don't know at which point Viral Stigma. Maybe these king moves aren't the best for defense. Maybe the king should walk around this way to leave this diagonal as long as possible for the bishop. Because this knight e6 technique would not work if black had bishop g1 to h2. If their king were on f1 or something. But yeah, the king was here in this line. I think if the king were on like f1 or something, maybe king b7. What would be the winning technique? You have to go. Yeah? Yeah. What would you do? Maybe like here. And then here. Now, here is so bishop f4 can be answered like this. So they have to go here. And then you go here. And that's winning. For example. You want to play something very dry for opening advice? I'm working on an extremely dry opening repertoire, Be Conquered, where we trade queens whenever possible, all exchange variations. Yeah. It's a 1d4 repertoire with, like, you know, things like the exchange Slav in it. Knight b5, bishop b6 is the better defense, of course, Dopesky. The computer played another dumb defense. It should go here. Then I come here. And I still do my knight a3 to c4 maneuver, I think, right? How can you learn the repertoire when it's finished? Maybe I'll publish it on Chess Dojo. I mean, I'm creating it on Chess Dojo, so that would be the easiest place to see it. But I am also maybe keeping it secret for myself. I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to share this one. There is, Tomi. Have you ever been to our website? Check this out. We've got a website. chessdojo.club. And I see your question, Sweet Blues. We'll definitely go and look at your knight takes b7 move. Okay, so on the Chess Dojo website, you go to games. You create a game. Right? You go new game. From PGN, you could paste it in if you've got the PGN. If you don't have the PGN, yeah, 11 years. If you don't have the PGN, you could go to starting position, just enter the game. And anyway, once you get a game, you put all the moves in here, and then you save it, and you publish it. And then Everyone can see it. You can send them a link. If they're following you, they can see it immediately. So, I'll delete that one. CJ. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, you're welcome, Tommy. All right, so, Tommy, your opponent wants to look at knight takes b7 in your game, so we're gonna go back to that for a moment. Oh, Elise is here. Sorry, Elise, I didn't realize you were here. Sorry. Okay, so let's go to the other game here. Sweet Blues. We're going to knight takes b7. Favorite game from the Grand Swiss? There were several. Maybe the game between Erdomus and Aditya Mittal. I also liked Maurizi's game with Artemyev a lot. Okay, so this is our moment. Knight takes b7. All right, what are we looking at here with knight takes b7? You're wondering what to do if rook to e8. Oh, tricky. Tommy says this was a mouse slip, this move, by the way. And that they were afraid after mouse slipping that this move might be winning for you instead of taking the pawn, just coming in, right? This pawn's hanging, the king's getting dragged out, threatens knight e6, winning a queen. Sorry, my mouse just stopped working, but knight e6, etc., right? So I guess, yeah, knight takes b7 would be similar if rook e8. Which there's a clever trap for anyone who didn't notice. This is the trap that Sweet Blues was wondering about. That would blunder a queen, seemingly. But maybe this move, check. Sorry, not check. This move, queen in here. Maybe that would do. I presume black would take the knight. White can take with check. King here. Maybe take this pawn first. Can I get back to this knight? Maybe I can't. Maybe I have to take here. Queen b7, queen h8, and rook e1. Thanks, Be Conquered. Yeah. You could also play rook c6 instead of queen c6 right here, and then you don't allow this. Yeah. That's playable as well. Yeah, white's got a lot of resources. Of course, this moves to slip, which leaves h6 hanging in the king position weird. Yeah, and the game before the checkmate, if you haven't seen the full game at least, the game before the checkmate was also really cool. It was just a good game straight up. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Maurizi against Artemiev. How do I get this game in a way where I can copy it and show it to you guys? Okay. All right, I think I found it finally. All right. Everybody see the board? Maurizi Artemiev. Here's a favorite game from the Grand Swiss that we didn't cover live. I just saw it later when I was clicking through games. I've played this line as white before. I like it. Fits my style and my likes. It's basically like, we don't care if you take on c3. Who cares about structure? We care about dark squared bishops. It's kind of like a Catalan against the Nimzo, ZJ. I'll recap the move order for you. G3 on move 4. Magnus played more or less this line against Hans Niemann in a famous game. When somebody asked, if you could listen and know the thoughts of one grandmaster in everything they thought during one game ever played, that was one of the first games that popped into my mind for a second. In the current days, in the current modern era, that would be the game that the most people would be wanting to know what somebody was thinking. But maybe it'd be more fun or instructive for me to think of some classic game and really understand Mikhail Tal's thought process or Gary Kasparov's. Anyway, this line here, I've played it as white as well. You basically say, like, oh yeah, you're playing the Nimzo, like, I'm playing the Catalan. Like, if you ever give me the dark squared bishop, great, your dark squares are weak. Who knows, who cares? Okay. The basic way to play is d5 for black, but Artemiev played c5 and d5, which is playable. White takes. This is a main line with knight d5. Kasparov's played this position before as well, before Magnus did. Okay, so now we get here, and, I'm pretty happy with white. And now the bishop's just kind of hanging out here. Maurizi threatens knight c7, and things start to get very intense here when he chooses not to bring this knight back to the great blockading square and play a slow pressuring game, and instead he took with the queen, saying, like, yeah, we're going to knock you out in the opening here. d5, d takes c4 and holding on. Yeah, that's not my style. But, Gukesh does that. So, whatever style you play, you'll be in good company with somebody. But yeah, I don't love clinging to pawns out of the opening, regardless of what Jesse may say about me. Okay, so black tries to guard the c7 square with this poor bishop, and Maurizi just keeps developing and says, to hell with this. And black says, you can't just keep leaving that pawn for me. Of course, they could be playing more passive moves like bishop e6, just saying I'm a little bit worse, but developing everything. But Artemiev says, no, you can't do this. Comes in, boom, boom. All this for, 7th rank, and next move he wants to put the rook here, and if you ever develop this, he'll take on b7 and defend b2 better, and the dark squares are unchallengeable. So Artemiev decides, being up a pawn is not enough compensation for how bad his position is after rook fc1. And he says, I allowed this because I can play g5 and just break you immediately. Bishop e3. What? Just retreats away from the rook. I mean... and you would think, maybe there's an exchange sack, right? You would think. Maybe there's an exchange sack here. Something like that, right? I haven't yet calculated hard on this to understand exactly what's going on, but I imagine that the reason was that he thinks it's better to get the queen here first and then maybe have different angles for the bishop. And if takes, well, first of all, he probably takes with check first to just leave the king weak forever and then open the f-file. And bishop e6, and I imagine the game goes on, but, white's not down anything and the black king's pretty ragged. So all the white pieces are better than the black ones as well. So, so black didn't take the rook on c7. They played knight to g4. That defends g5. Looks to maybe take this piece. And now there's no knight hanging here, so you're also threatening the rook. And Moritzi just says, please take the rook. Please take the rook. What? King here. Boom. Slaughtered on the diagonal suddenly. The king comes out a step too far. Hilarious geometry that if the bishop blocks, takes, queen g4 to e2, kind of Pac-Mans them all up. Right? Boom. So the king has to come out in the middle of the board. Gives a Chekaruski. If the king ever wanders onto e7, bishop g5, finishes it on dark squares. So here black's just getting... I mean, Gefilte Fish might be around to comment on whether this is appropriate or not, but it seems like black's just kind of getting filleted by these bishops and the queens, right? White's got 3 diagonal pieces, and the king just can't dodge them all. So it gets this, and now it's mop up. Material is pretty good for white, and the black king he could resign, but he doesn't. Still doesn't. I mean, dude's not taking your hanging pieces, and you're still not resigning, so... Oh. So. Anyway, I liked that game a lot, even though I haven't yet, figured out all the details of how it did or didn't work, but I enjoyed that one. Seems like Sally liked this game too. Adults take things far too seriously. I'm now off to my garden. It's great never growing up. Good for you, Sally. I mean, you've got similar taste in chess to me. Don't understand everything you're saying there, but... Okay. Toby Martinez thinks that they have managed to upload their first game to the Chess Dojo website. Let's see if Tommy did it. Ho ho! It says Tomas White, classical opponent black. You did it, Tomas. You now know how to use the Chess Dojo website. Halloo hallay, oh frabjous day. In celebration of which, we're going to take a quick look at your game, right? Or just be like, congrats, you learned how to upload. Thanks for making an account on my site. Now I will not look at your game. The Short King Walk. Viral Stigma, yeah, that's a great game. But wasn't played at the, whatchamacallit, Grand Swiss. Elise was asking me about great games from the Grand Swiss last week. 2 nights. Hey, Tomas, I played this too. Well, actually, have I played it yet? I prepared it. I don't know if I played it. Queen e2, evil. Looking for the quick Mataruski. Knight e5, interesting. Take gets... Oh, all to set up this evil. So now if the queen gets captured, there's bishop f7. And otherwise, the threat of f7 gets black to play e6, trapping their own bishop. Because it looked like white's play was kind of dorky, like, what are we doing putting our queen in the middle of the board and getting tempoed by knight f6, right? If white didn't have bishop c4, this opening line would be kind of dumb for white. But then with this move, oh, pretty nice. And now the queen retreats, but drops back to a really good square, supporting the bishop and the knight and out of the way of everything. Nice. You knew that taking on e5 with the pawn could be good. I've taken forever to try and understand this. Oh, this game's really good so far. And it's just the beginning. Just the beginning. Oh, switching diagonals to the better diagonal. Oh, you played like every game perfectly. Wow. And now the h-pawn, like alpha 0. Black's got nowhere safe to go with the king. Whichever side they go to, white can then attack them. No counterplay. Position looks bad. I don't know if you got the right plan right here, though. I'm thinking of this plan, Tomas. Rook h3, rook g3. And then if they play g6, maybe rook takes g6. You'd have to calculate it. I can't promise that it works. No promises. Bishop g3, much more reasonable. Going for f5. Black tries to hold it off. Big question here is f5. This was a classical game. You think it wasn't the right plan because it got stopped. Okay, yeah. When I first saw your plan, I was also suspicious of it. Also because I feel like c5, c4, black's making a little progress against it. But actually, right here, you might have f5 winning the game. So f5, gf, bishop f5, e, f5, e6 is very interesting. Yeah, it looks winning for white, that particular line. So let's try something here. Look at this. We'll go here, 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 here. It says this variation is not saved. Right-click to save as a comment. So watch this. I'm going to put a comment on your game, Tomas. Save variation as comment. So now, when you go back to your game at some point, you might see off on the left side of your board, you know, David Proust suggested a variation. f5, queen takes e4. The pawn on e5 is defended for now. Hey, Courtney. The ratings aren't written in here, but we know that Tomas is about 1900 on chess.com. So, a solid advanced player, but not a master. So we got g6. You felt blocked, but it's an important question whether you could have really gone through with your plan anyway. Bishop f2. Black grabbed the pawn. You came here. Oh, tell me you played rook takes g6. No, I don't think rook g6 works. Now you went for f5. Okay. Takes. Takes. Oh, that was your point. Either way they would have taken, you were going to do this to break through. They try to get a pawn. Then take here. Now you got the breakthrough. Right on. Pawn takes queen e6, looks probably losing for black, so they try and block the file. Makes sense. But bishop g3 might win the piece. Maybe you have to take on f7 first, though. Then bishop g3, rook e8, rook d5 with a mess of pins. Okay, you went here. They played f6. Trade, queen. Oh, nice! Just dodging around, and the king is just surrounded. And there's another threat over here. This was more or less the end of the game. No, queen e6 was check. Oh my god, you have to keep fighting. Rook a7, you have rook e1 winning the queen. And if they played queen c8, I guess you still have a win. Nice. You spend time on this stuff here, Tomi? Did you calculate a bunch when you went for this position? You weren't sure about a line after fe5. You wanted to go rook g8. Holy moly. Then here, then here, then here, huh? Then maybe this. This and this or something. Right? It's not 100% sure that it wins, yeah? It was a lot of calculation. Cool. Do you enjoy calculating? Because this looks fun. I'll put another variation in here for you. Queen a5 winning? Ah, queen a5 winning. So that means you have to operate all with checks here as white, right? Because of this queen a5 move. So it means you probably only have a draw in this rook g8 line. Absolutely, Dabo, agreed. So you can also play it like this. Queen h5 check. Rook takes. Rook check. King here. Rook check. King here and take here. Unfortunately, it's a brilliant queen sack, but then you have to play a rook endgame down like 3 pawns or so. So, not quite. Let's see, what else could you do after fe5? I believe in your position, by the way. You surely have some more or less winning move here. Why not a simple, like queen g2, like in the game? Wouldn't that win exactly the same as against queen e5? Well, not exactly the same, but similarly to queen e5. It's not as exciting as queen h5, unfortunately. But the basic premise is, you know, that you get in here and cause some trouble. So you were thinking a draw, Tomi. Queen h5, queen f5, queen h5, queen h5. I don't see a defense for black after this queen g2, like in the game. You're threatening queen takes rook, right? They can't castle either way, and queen g6 is very powerful too. So, yeah. And queen f3 is a good move as well here. Okay, let's see how it finishes. So they go queen e5, queen g2, check here, rook e1, rook e7, take it, and queen a8, and take. Boom. Oh, you wanted to do the extra check and then rook d7. The problem there, Tomi, is that queen a5 line that that Viral Sigma saw, right? Alvin can now see clearer into future positions. Today, you saw the position 4 moves ahead, and you saw it correctly, huh, Alvin? That's beautiful. Well, that was an awesome game, Tomas. Great first game to post on Chess Dojo. Let me see. I'm not the best at the frills and stuff. I'm better at just putting up games and comments. But let me see if I can find you. And then I can go to your activity. And I can see that you published a game analysis. And I can give you like a little emote or something here for putting up a game, right? Like thumbs up, right? Good work. Or let's go. an exclam. It was a brilliant game, so let's give you actually 2 exclams. And we'll say, great first game to post. There we go. And that's how the site works, right? All right, that's Chess Dojo. That's Chess Dojo, yo. Don't you know? Welcome to the dojo. Whoops. I just did something. I don't know what it was. Yikes. I changed something in my OBS and I don't even know what it was. I mouse slipped something or other. All right. Well, that was a fun evening, folks. That was a fun evening. Only a few games, but they were fun. We got to see some real endgame grinding. And then a couple random brilliancies at the end. So with that, I'm going to go and wish all of you a good night. Catch you next time. And yeah, Kostia's going to be on tomorrow. I'm going to take tomorrow off. But I'll see you again soon. Sunday or Monday. Dang, we got a lot of strong players in chat today. Any ideas for quitting chess? Watch that video I sent you, B Concord. Might turn your chess life around at least. All right. Good night, folks. I'm gonna send a raid. Bonne nuit, Elise.